The first thing that came to my mind was the concept of capitalism. What is capitalism? Because you mentioned that many times, and of course it is now when you listen to the news, it's all over. So I thought maybe if I express my thoughts about capitalism, then it would open up more discussion or more or precise discussion. The way that I see it is that the roots of capitalism lie deep in the basic human impulse. Impulses such as individual ownership, personal initiative, and the desire to improve one's material condition. And even long before modern capitalism, before it becoming a formal economic system, human beings lived by working for themselves, cultivating land, producing goods, trading surplus, and trying to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families. So this pattern is really intertwined into human nature. That's what I'm trying to mention. People care more when they own or create and oversee something, and they are motivated to work harder and innovate when they directly benefit from their labor. So that is my perspective of the core of capitalist thinking. So in this sense, capitalism did not appear as an artificial construct at certain period in history or imposed upon society. I think it emerged organically as the institutionalization of human drives and human impulses. What impulses? Such as ambition, reciprocity, individual responsibility, and pursuit of prosperity. So modern capitalism just tried to institutionalize these impulses. So far from being a historical anomaly or oddity, I think capitalism represents the normal and enduring way humans have organized material life. So because capitalism channels these impulses, this inclination, so it is really it has become a standard and adaptive framework for structuring economic structure or economic system or economic relationships. Its capacity to harness efforts, reward individual initiatives, create wealth, and so on. These have sustained much of contemporary or modern material progress. So the problems associated with capitalism or being associated with capitalism these days, such as exploitation, inequality, instability, and so on, they have arisen not from the essence of the system. That's how I see it, but from failures in terms of power imbalances, in terms of cultural distortion, and basically instability that sometimes comes with any large scale human enterprise. So these excesses can and should be corrected, definitely, but they do not negate the underlying alignment between capitalism and the psychological tendencies that make cooperative economic life possible. So it is within this broader historical and in fact anthropological context that Marxism, for example, must be understood. So in my understanding, for Marxism, for instance, which basically introduced the strongest critique of capitalism, far from offering a stable or empirically grounded design of economic life, it functioned primarily as a cultural and moral revolt against the injustices of industrial capitalism. More profoundly, it operated as a kind of secularized characterization of salvation, a grand narrative that promises an overall historical removal or overcoming historical contradictions, or abolish or eliminate suffering, and achieve a final state of human unity and universality. So Marxism's dialectical thinking is like almost a prophecy expressed in materialistic terms, and echoed the structure of almost a religious eschatology. That is, humanity would pass through trials, purify itself through struggles, and ultimately enters a redeemed stage of history. This vision rested on deeply subjective, idealized, and moralized expectations of human behavior, assuming that when or once class antagonism disappears, individuals would naturally act for the collective good and become free from selfish impulses. So in this light, Marxism was less a practical system of economic organization and more a cultural or even a spiritual reaction to the traumas of early modernity, attempting to provide or supply the material progress that had not been delivered, such as, in other words, the capitalism or material development or technology or scientific improvements had not been able to deliver. And those were like meanings, values, harmony, moral purpose. But because it demanded the transformation of human nature itself, basically suppressing individual incentives and subordinating personal initiative to collective ideals. That's what basically happened in the way that the Marxism was practiced, and we saw the outcome. So it ultimately proved impossible to sustain, to be sustainable in practice. So Marxism or Marxism power, in fact, was in its moral critique and utopian longing, not in its economic realism. It wasn't really economic realism. It aspired to be a theory of liberation, but functioned in many ways as a kind of theology of history, promising redemption through revolution and all that. So along with that, I just wanted to going back to the roots of capitalism or modern capitalism, and just say a few words about Adam Smith, the founder of, famously labeled as the founder of capitalism, and the concept of enlightened self-interest and invisible hand. So Adam Smith argues that individuals pursuing their own material betterment or their self-interest unintentionally promote the public good, and they do it more effectively than if they had consciously tried to do so. This is famously captured as he said, I'm just paraphrasing, that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher or the baker that we have our own dinner, but from their regard for their own interest. And then that brings him to the concept of the invisible hand. The invisible hand is the metaphor for the societal benefit that arises as an unintended consequence of individuals competing and cooperating in a free market. This mechanism basically relies on the idea that in a competitive environment, to profit, the butcher must offer good meat at a fair price and then benefiting the outcome or the customer. Also, Smith's concept of self-interest is generally not an endorsement of pure selfishness, as some people have pursued, or greed. In fact, it is a rational or enlightened self-interest, which he assumes operates within a societal framework for justice, for law and order, and so on. Interestingly, many people may not know that Adam Smith wrote 2 books, Wealth of Nations on economy, and then The Theory of Moral Sentiment. And these 2 must be viewed complementary. So, according to the Theory of Moral Sentiment, he viewed, his work as a coherent project, that moral sentiment explains how people behave in the personal face-to-face world of morals, and Wealth of Nations explains how people behave in the impersonal world of the market. And but both of these are linked by humanity's need for self-interest and social approval. So for a long period of time, scholars or writers basically debated this so-called Adam Smith's problem, that is the apparent contradiction between the sympathy of the moral sentiment and the self-interest of wealth of nations. However, we have come to realize and better understand that and largely agree with this, that there is no contradiction. The 2 books, the 2 sentiments describe the same human who is both self-interested and morally just or constrained. And Adam Smith was particularly influenced by the critique of commercial society offered by Jean-Jacques Rousseau and many others, and he realized the potential for wealth and inequality to corrupt the soul and lead to superficial social environment. So he was really aware of the moral pitfalls inherent in the system he promoted.